Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, guys, I have a great guest with me tonight. I have Erik Rydberg. He's running for Green Party, Secretary of State of Green Party in this great state of California. Erik, please tell everyone hi.
How you doing, everybody? Thanks for having me on, Jamal.
No, absolutely. You're a friend of the show. I love saying that for some reason. Friend of the show. You're a friend of the show. You've been on the show before. And I think at the time you were in communications. So what was the change? What was the thing that got you to jump to running for Secretary of State? Because that's a big jump.
Yeah, well, really, I mean,
That's serious politics.
It is a very big jump. And really, it goes back to 2016 and the Democratic primary. At that point, I ran for delegate for Bernie Sanders in my district that I was living in at the time, District 1. I'd kept a really close eye. We did a lot of voter registration. I began learning through watching the primaries progression in states like Arizona, and New York, and Nevada. I started to dig very, very deeply into like how is our democratic process running? Like, what are all the mechanisms of it? How is this? Because California is coming in the primary. And I want to make sure that some of these things that we're seeing in 2016 in Arizona, in New York, and in Nevada, I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that those things don't happen here. Things like cutting polling stations, purging people from the voter rolls, flat out not counting ballots, things like that. Unfortunately, no matter how much research I did, we have 18 million voters here in California. And no one person or no organization, even like Ballots for Bernie, we're going to be able to prepare 18 million people for things like voter suppression, right? And that's what we witnessed here in California was massive voter suppression against particularly no party preference voters. And Democrats that were trying to vote for Bernie Sanders, right? And even 1/3 of the Green Party voted for Bernie in that primary, right? So everybody was on board for those values, those progressive values. College is a right, healthcare is a right, all those things. Everybody was showing up in huge numbers. But regardless of our independent oversight committees like Ballots for Bernie, as an example, there was nothing that, a small group of democracy-loving do-gooders were going to be able to educate 18 million people about the kind of voter suppression that they may face in the primary. So that's why I'm running for Secretary of State now, is because of Alex Padilla and his inability to govern fairly as Secretary of State. Somebody from the Bernie campaign needed to challenge and raise the debate on the elections fraud and suppression that happened here in California. And luckily, these lawsuits, multiple lawsuits been filed against Alex Padilla, and one of them just finally came through. He had a lawsuit rolled against him for throwing out 50,000 ballots in the primary by saying that they couldn't verify the signatures.
Yeah.
So now, from now on, our voters in California, if our county registers cannot verify our signatures, they have to call us. We have a chance to make sure that our signatures get verified before they start tossing out 50,000 ballots.
They tossed out 50,000 ballots. That's
just regarding those signatures. There was many more, to the tunes of hundreds of thousands that weren't counted for various other reasons. But this is the one tail we were able to pin on the donkey, pun intended. So yeah, that's why I'm running for Secretary of State, is because 20 million of us at least, right? 13 million of us actually got our votes counted, but millions and millions of us struggled in the Bernie Sanders campaign, and election justice and election integrity is of the utmost importance if we want to make the kind of changes our country needs.
I agree with you, because how can you get anything done if you can't even validate the person who's supposed to be in that seat? You have all of these people who said, this is who we want for this office.
Yep.
How can you know? It's like I give you an example. People will say, well, Jill Stein got more votes than 1%. It's like, but how do you know? Like, how can you verify it? Even when you try to validate the number of votes, you have this thing of them charging you additional money for it, or they hitting you with these weird costs and these expenditures.
I mean, Jill
weird.
Stein's a perfect example. That recount that she did exposed massive, massive discrepancies with the voter machines in Detroit. And Detroit had to get something like almost twice as many people somehow magically voted than were even registered in Detroit, right?
That's amazing.
So her recount exposed that. And what they had to do was they went and got all new voting machines. I wish they would just listen to us and just do hand counted paper ballots, like read the Green New Deal. Like, we have the solutions, but of course they went and got more computer electronic voting machines. So it's just a matter of time before those are worthless.
Do you
think they all end up in the dump?
Do you think they get those in order for the fudge factor? I mean, because if you really, really wanted to know, like if you want to figure out how to come up with a system in order to make sure that the vote is secure, you could do that instead of just going immediately to machines. I mean, hand counted makes the most sense. Like having people to be able to watch the hand count and having both members of whoever's running be able to have a secondary validation of the vote, meaning being able to get a recount of the vote without, $1 million recount. That's insane. Like that's like you going somewhere to get something to eat and you say, "Can I get extra ketchup?" They said 25 cents because they want to stop you from getting extra ketchup. That's what it puts me in mind of. It's this thing of we don't want you to do a recount. We don't want you to validate the vote. So we're going to charge you some exorbitant price in order to create a bar from doing that.
It didn't cost that much money to do the recount. It cost that much money to battle it out in court with all the lawyers and everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it shouldn't be that way.
It should not be that way.
Election integrity. So California was strange in the last primary. So one state after the next, Sanders was getting, there was always this kind of weird deviation between what the exit totals, people go in, make their vote, they walk out and say, "I voted for this person." And yet the exit totals was never matching the actual results. I mean, like way off. Then when they get to California, they just stop having the exit totals. I heard that there were a lot of uncounted ballots sitting around in California. Is that true? Like there were just all of these ballots where nobody counted, like you say, in the millions.
Yeah, no, I mean it's worse than that. In San Diego, there was destruction of ballots. Same exact thing that Tim Canova went through, right? Same exact thing, right? And I would, also Cheri Honkala. She last year running in the 197th, Democrats just got charged with felonies for rigging her election. Right?
Wow.
So I mean, so we got Tim Canova, we got California, we got New York, we got Arizona, we got Cheri Honkala's election. These are regular practices by the Democratic Party, and the reason is because the populace, the masses. We want free college tuition. We want to end these wars. Like, no, if the American people today had the vote to say, "Hey, do we want to continue all these wars?" We'd resoundingly answer no, right? Yeah. So they have to stop the will of the people. Otherwise, what they're going to get is the end of their endless war machine, right? No more money making bombs. No more taking all of our school books and our roads and our bridges and turning them into a bomb and blowing them up to get other brown people's resources, right? So, I mean, they have to shut down the system of democracy because it's their Achilles heel. And they'll pull out all stops to do it. And it's up to us, unfortunately, in this country, when you have, it literally like the definition of fascism being corporate power seizing the state. And that's what we have, right? So in this country, it's up to the people, it's up to us to actually rise up, seize the state back from the capitalists, the corporations, and install a new system, a system that is going to allow our votes to be counted, more democratic systems, systems of actually mutual aid, where we are paying for our infrastructure and paying for our colleges and our schools and our healthcare and our mental health care. But it's never, one of the things that Bernie Sanders said that was so correct is in history, that kind of change never comes from the top. It always comes from the bottom up, right? Yeah. So, and we're seeing that. There's more, being I'm Pomo Indian from Sonoma, And right now, there's more Indigenous candidates running for office than ever in history.
I saw that.
And so things like Standing Rock, things like the Agua Prieta pipeline, Sable Trail, Trans-Pecos, Pilgrim Pipeline with the Ramapo Lenape and New Jersey, these things, the more capitalism and corporate control starts digging into your community and pressing your community, the more people start waking up, the more people start organizing. What we really need now, in my opinion, is this mass mobilization of the people that is actually free of corporate influence, whether it be corporate influence through the media, corporate influence through the party that you're registered with. But we actually have to make a hard break, and demand that human rights are actually elevated above corporate rights. And it's going to be the fight of our lives. It's going to be the fight.
It's like the human rights thing. It's like Martin Luther King, those guys used to walk cold signs that says, "I'm a man." And in this thing for equal rights. And I think we're at the point of this kind of human rights struggle. Like, what's the least, where's the floor for human dignity? And where's the floor for human beings to persist in our affairs? There's something else that you said that I think is dead on. I do think there's something going on, because the Republican Party, I remember the Republican Party used to be the party that would monkey around with the voting thing, you know, the voter fraud and all this other stuff that they used to come up with to try to depress the vote, to keep certain people from voting. And they used to have to do that because if you're a party completely beholden to plutocrats, well, how do you get elected? You're going to have to find these constituencies that don't necessarily care about economic issues. They have their own demographics. The Democratic Party, in an odd way, doesn't have that luxury per se. It's weird. They're focusing more so on identity while ignoring the economic part. But how can I say this? It's like there's something going on that people are rejecting this. I mean, they've lost 1,100 seats throughout the United States. House, Senate, they lost us to a reality show host. And even now, all throughout the United States, the DCCC is putting their thumb on the scale. I don't remember them having to do this. Like, even like you said, the polling stuff, the way like what they were doing with Sanders and all, in order to try to like depress the number of people who are going to be able to vote to the left. They seem to be taking dramatic measures in order to put their thumb on the scale, in order to push back whatever they consider to be this kind of populist revolt. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong on this? Like, am I missing this? It seems like it's happening more frequently.
Right. Well, I think what the difference is just in the last 100 years, we've seen the demographic of who's a citizen, of who's allowed to vote.
That's a good point.
Has completely changed. I mean, it used to be only rich white male landowners could vote. So you're talking about the difference on like some small economic. So the Democratic and Republican Party only differed by, some economic policy. They were all white supremacists. Yeah. They were all capitalists, right? Like they had everything in common. So, I mean, there really wasn't a need to suppress the vote because only white male landowners could vote. So
it's like you knew what you needed either way.
Yes, I mean, yeah, two parties, maybe slightly different platforms. But then, there was a Million Man March. There was the Civil Rights era and the Civil Rights Act. And during that time, not only did the suffrage movement and women got the right to vote, right? And I would like to note that it was the Equal Rights Party that ran Victoria Woodruff and Frederick Douglass as their president and vice presidential candidates, a third party that pushed hard for women's right to vote that preceded the actual ruling, right? Yeah. So, I mean, most of the things that we have in this country that are worth a damn, like 40-hour work week, the direct election to the Senate, many of these things came about from independent organizations, third parties, labor movements, struggling outside of the dominant system to actually get that change. And so the infuriating part for me and why the Democratic Party is having to do what you're saying is Democratic Party got wise during the Civil Rights Act and said, holy crap, there's a Million Man March in the streets. That's a lot of voters, right? and they said, that kind of a movement can pretty much topple the system if, like, it's not channeled correctly, right?
Yeah.
So, being that the Democratic Party is a capitalist party, it is a pro-war party. It has been. I mean, it's the oldest colonial party.
Yeah.
It's the party that pushed the Indian Relocation Act on the Cherokee. And
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Andrew Jackson, right?
Andrew Jackson, right? And even, and then a lot of people say, well, now you're talking about a Democratic Party of old, right? Well, I mean, so when Indigenous people talk about 500 years of genocide and colonialism, for us here in California, it's only 167 years, right?
Yeah.
And when California became a state in the United States, that was 1850. It was Democrats that came here and did that. And the first thing they did was they mandated the $1.5 million they mandated to Indian hunters to collect our scalps, our body parts. They sold our children for $50 to the tunes of thousands in the slave markets in Arcata, and Chico, and Sacramento, and San Francisco.
You know what's wild about that? When they talk about like the Russian Revolution, and they would say, "Oh, Lenin, he was such a violent thug. He just came and took over, et cetera, et cetera." And they completely forget, like, revolutions tend to be somewhat bloody. The United States literally committed a genocide. I mean, from one end of the country, destroying and obliterating a population in the most heinous ways, as almost like the birth of the nation. Whereas, the Russian Revolution, they're like, oh, those guys, look at those dirty workers out there trying to do, it's amazing this level of propaganda where you look at one and one is bad. You look at the other is supposedly good, even though really nasty things was happening in that other.
That continues today. One of the big things for me was the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Obama pardoning a turkey while real indigenous people are getting their heads bashed in.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the donors, when you follow the money, Trump had money invested in some of the donors, right? But the Democratic Party's like 5 of their top 10 donors were invested in the Dakota Access Pipeline, So whether we went blue or we went red in 2016, like that pipeline was. So that's. And it doesn't stop there. I wish I could say it stops there, but in California is really a good example of what the Democratic Party stands for.
California is fascinating to me, by the way. I mean, it's supposed to be a lefty state, and you guys are ensconced in poverty, like in some of these areas. Like the homeless population was mind blowing to me when I heard the numbers. Like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the number of homeless in California dramatically skyrocketed. And if you're talking about, Democrats for the most part have a super majority in that state, right?
And have for a long time. And so, and with fracking, right? So Jerry Brown had the opportunity to stop fracking, and he pushed it right through because the Democratic Party supports fracking. No matter what, they can trot out a couple of progressive Dems that say how bad fracking is, but if you just look what's going on behind the scenes, look where the money's going. They are full support of fracking. Right?
Let me ask you this: what's your? I know you say election integrity is a platform for you personally, because I know you're running for Secretary of State, so your goals are somewhat specific to the area to which you're running. But the Green Party itself, 2 main questions for the Green Party thing. I don't want to say what's the platform, because the platform for the Green Party is pretty straightforward. But if California was a Green Party state, how would you guys accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? So first, what do you want to accomplish? B, how would you accomplish with the constraints of a state? Let's say it that way. And what do you believe? Why don't you believe Green Party has caught more fire? Like you had the worst candidate in the history of candidates, meaning Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. What's the thing that's preventing the Green Party from being more active? Because I always get this question of people saying, because I always rag on both parties, and I always say this kind of solidarity of that you may not necessarily know where you're going to go, but at the very least know where you're not going to be, where you're not going to put your support. Why don't more people go for the Green Party, and why has the Democratic Socialists of America done so well recently? And I'm trying to juxtapose those 2 things of why one is doing well, but the other is not, even though the platform is somewhat similar.
Well, one is still very much entrenched in a capitalist party that has massive media outlets and outreach. So when people look at, Democratic Socialists of America predominantly work with the Democratic Party. They have all along. So that scenario, people are attracted to power, right? This is a capitalist country. The reason the Green Party isn't bigger is because it's a capitalist country. Capitalists own the media, right? Capitalists own the politicians. The politicians write the legislation for the capitalists, right? They kick the League of Women Voters off the
debate
Commission on Presidential Debates.
Yeah.
So I've yet to hear Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton say that they're going to give any of the money that they received from Trump's tax break to social issues. So I don't
keep waiting for that one, man.
Don't believe the hype. So they can cry about how bad the tax bill is, but they're getting filthy rich off, right? So capitalism always produces the same thing, And for indigenous people, it's one of the critical elements of colonialism, the need to acquire resources for infinite growth, right? The wording, they always use a pretty wording, in American interests, right? We must seize the land of Oklahoma and it's always in American interest. But what they're saying is capitalism, these corporations that have been here from day one, they want to seize the resources. They need a labor force. They need slavery to ascend that ladder of success, but they have to have an oppressed class to do it upon, right? So now that slavery is abolished, what do we have? We got prison slavery, right? We have prison slavery where literally it says, in the abolishment of slavery, it says slavery is still legal just as a form of punishment for a crime, right? Yeah. So that's why made in America nowadays means made in prison for virtually no wages at all. And we have NAFTA, and we're outsourcing. We're finding that oppressed class in other countries. And we're willing to let our people starve in the streets with no jobs and no homes like they are here in California, and able to continue enriching those capitalists, right?
Yeah. It's capitalism is that, it's funny. I was having a conversation with my mom the other day, and I was trying to make the point to her that it's not the job of a business to give you a job, if that makes sense. Like the job of that business in the capitalist system is just to maximize their profit. You getting a job is just happenstance. It's just there for them to make their profit. If they can't make a profit off of you, they don't necessarily going to give you a job. And, this is, if I can make more of a buck by shipping this product over to China, 50% of the goods that we get from China are from American companies. Think about that.
Exactly.
That's one of those things of, it's like, how can we maximize our profit? We can maximize our profit by shipping stuff overseas and then having it shipped back to us with no tariffs or anything else because we've passed these trade deals. And that American worker who was getting 15, 16 bucks an hour no longer has a job. But hey, I'm doing magnificently well. Look at all this money. It's like I'm Scrooging it up.
Any country that has such radical extremes, like the most billionaires and the most homeless people of any major nation, those extremes come about because of unsustainable, economically irresponsible system like capitalism, right? And you could see what they did after the New Deal, right? After FDR came in and he regulated capitalism, right? He didn't get rid of capitalism. He just regulated, right? Well, so all of these capitalists all over, they got real wise. They got together, right? They made the analysis that the Democratic Party actually can't be in a position to be putting people like FDR in place that are going to be doing this regulation. So they infiltrated it, right? But they also deregulated virtually every single thing that FDR put in place.
Yes, they did. They clawed back things. I think one of the things that lefties, I think they really need to, I don't think as a left, we can look at this stuff as being random, or not random, that's the wrong word for it. I think we need to look at this as somewhat of a war. And what I mean by that is it's an existential struggle that's going to take place between the people without versus the people who have. The plutocrats understood that. So the moment that FDR's legislation was signed for the New Deal, they were immediately trying to claw back those gains. Any changes that needs to take place needs to learn from the lessons of that. Meaning you need to break the hands of the people who are going to claw those gains back so they can't claw them back. It's like we have a new deal. And at some point that new deal has to stop into this kind of thing of a new hegemonic viewpoint of how we've organized our society where human beings matter more.
Yep.
How would the Green Party in California, and I guess, and let me ask this specifically, how do you get that changed? Because I understand with all of the oil spills that's been recently come out, like, it was a massive oil spill recently in South Dakota. Like they, these guys were saying that the pipeline was never supposed to leak and everything else. And then there was a major oil spill, like just embarrassing because capitalism. Yeah, it was amazing. How I always make the point that fighting those things at the level of the problem doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So a company has $1 billion. So let's say if there's $1 billion investment to create a pipeline, they're going to make a pipeline. Like regardless of all environmental work that a person may do, at the end of the day, there are billions of dollars backing those things. So you have an incentive to kind of push those things. How does movements, or for that matter, politics and movements change that? And I'm talking to this from the context of the Green Party itself, because that's where you are. You're affiliated with the Green Party. Absolutely. How does the Green Party tackle this?
So it cannot, like, I love how you said, how politics and movements, right?
Yeah.
Because just politics is not going to do it, right? So anybody who says that, no, don't focus on building social movements, build political parties, I'm sorry, friend, you're wrong, right? And anybody who says, well, politics is just a waste of time, don't be a schmuck, go join social movement. I'm sorry, friend, but you're wrong, actually. Exactly. We've had massive social movements in this country. Now, when you build a social movement and it's vibrant and it's demanding change and it's scaring the pants off all these bot politicians everywhere, you actually have to have some sort of electoral arm to codify that energy and that movement into legislation that actually stand the test of time. And you can't stop there. You have to have that electoral arm to ensure it stays into place. And probably the best example that I could bring to you is actually Jill Stein, right? Like, a lot of people don't know Jill's history and how she got into the Green Party. So Jill was fighting refineries in Massachusetts, right, where they had some successes, right? She then later joined a coalition to bring campaign finance reform in Massachusetts, and they won. They did it. Massachusetts got money out of politics, right? They succeeded. They formed a coalition. They brought in the social movement. They were able to get it on the ballot. They were able to pass it. And what happened? The 70%, 70, 80% Democrats in control of the state overturned it so they can continue taking corporate money.
That's amazing. They did something like that in Maine also, where Maine tried to do this ranked choice voting. Maine put out ranked choice voting, and the Democrats and Republicans repealed it, and the public repealed.
Yep.
Man, I love that.
People's
that's
veto.
That's a perfect example of people power in the political space, where it's like the big haul, like the lift that you have to take on in order to get it through, and then to have Congress. They should have voted each and every one of those people out who decided to repeal that bill. That's amazing. The public is saying, this is what we want. And then the politicians say, yeah, we don't like that. We don't like that.
Of course they don't like that. Ranked choice voting is a massive threat. And that's why Maine is, the Green Party of Maine is doing fantastic.
They should be fantastic. I hope they are.
So, Maine, the Green Party of Maine is the first Green Party in America. They were the first.
I didn't know that.
Yep, 1984. So the Green Party of the United States wasn't the Green Party of the United States originally. What it was called the Green Committees of Correspondence, right? Mm-hmm. And it was, attributing back to the Committees of Correspondence and like the founding of America, right? But the Green Committee of Correspondence were anti-nuclear activists, environmental activists. One of my mentors was part of the Green Committees of Correspondence. His name's C.T. Lawrence Butler. Mm-hmm. He was one of the co-founders of Food Not Bombs, right? He was the one who wrote the book on Food Not Bombs in '91, right? So who you had at the table in the Green Committees of Correspondence were socialists, anarchists like CT, right? That they reject capitalism and state socialism, right?
Yeah.
It's
like Chomsky, yeah.
Power to the people, not the capitalist or the state, right? And that's the truth. I firmly believe in that. And so if you look through the Green Party's platform, you'll see all these kinds of things. If you look through the 10 key values, right? Values are super important. And so what CT brought to the Green Party was consensus. He was an expert facilitator, wrote the book on conflict and consensus. And what he brought was values-based consensus. That's where the 10 key values come from.
Nice.
Where you have, we talk about socialism, but just any socialism won't do, right? You don't want state authoritarian socialism because that will oppress the people. There's a ditch on either side of the road. You can have capitalist control with too much power in little hands. They'll oppress the people. You can have state power and state control, power in too much hands, and they'll oppress the people. What we have to do is empower the people. And the way the Green Party chooses our candidates and expresses itself is through these key values, right? Of democracy being number one, right? The people's will must be number one, right? Social justice, right? I mean, America is the epitome of horrible social justice, right? Ecology, because if we don't have an environment to live in, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Right. Nonviolence with the need for self-defense, right? Like the Green Party was in the Senate and the House, and we had the presidency, and a foreign country invaded us with military force. We would use every Tomahawk missile, Apache helicopter, and tank to defend ourselves, right? We're not pacifists, right? So, by the way, I'd really love to see one day if they would take these indigenous names off of their war machines. That'd be great.
Like Apache, Tomahawk.
Yeah.
Red
Kiowa, helicopters, all these things.
Yeah.
But so those volume systems go on, and this is where you start hearing, like when I look through and I see C.T. Lawrence and I see the socialists and the communists and the anarchists that were kind of at the building of the Green Party, is I see it in that platform, democracy being number one, right? I know John Adams called democracy anarchism. He said, you allow the poor to just rise up throughout the rich, no man's property, or, will be safe. And I see, the fifth key value is decentralization. I mean, that's probably the biggest one, is decentralization of power, where we have the Central Intelligence Agency. Mm-hmm. We have the executive branch of the government. We have very, very, very much power and very little hands in this country via the setup of our government. And that's a damn shame, because if you go back and look how we got the federalist system, where they got the idea from. They actually got it from the Iroquois Confederacy, right? Mm-hmm. The Six Nations, the Great Law of Peace, which was democracy, and that's what this country's built up. I mean, everything about America is so unoriginal and just co-opted and hijacked. I mean, specifically from indigenous people. I mean, even the eagle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The eagle, if you get gifted 2 eagle feathers, it's a thing, and they even took the eagle. And why the Green Party is because the value system is there, the platform is there, that analysis that capitalism is god awful, state socialism can be just as bad. It's actually power to the people, right? So decentralization of that power, empowering our communities. Like when we go to do the Green New Deal, right? I encourage anybody and everybody who has not read in length, word for word, the Green New Deal, go to gp.org and look up the Green New Deal. It's a 4-part program. The Economic Bill of Rights that FDR wasn't able to get through, a green transition, getting off of the fossil fuels, taking hemp off the Schedule 1 federal drug list, as well as solar panels and wind farms and permaculture and all this stuff that's long overdue for America.
It really is.
Financial reform, breaking up the big banks, public banking, like one of my things that I can really see, like the divestment from Dakota Access Pipeline in Seattle, where they pulled $3 billion out.
Yeah.
You can get some public banks, right? Get those public banks, put your money into your public bank in your community, so your dollars aren't fleeing your community, going to these investment banks who are then going to fund Dakota Access Pipeline, right? And then the last one, fourth part of the Green New Deal, is a functioning democracy. This is my platform. Like when you go literally, that's what's great about the Green parties. I don't have to come up with a lot of really brilliant ideas because they're already laid out. So all I have to do is say, this Green New Deal is immaculate. I'm running for Secretary of State. So the fourth part, a functioning democracy, is what we need. And in there, what do we see? Hand-counted paper ballots. 59 countries. 59 countries are 100% hand-counted paper ballots, no machines whatsoever, right? And Germany actually ruled that electronic voting machines are unconstitutional because the vote needs to be verifiable without any specialized expertise or techie knowledge. Right?
Yeah, agreed. I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm software engineer. It's like whatever the software they put in it is the thing that's actually reading the vote. Not, it's like they spit out a number. How do you know that number is right? Some of these things are black box, so you don't even necessarily know whether or not your vote was counted the way that it was counted. And people just walk around and say, yeah, this is the election result. It's like, but how do you know? Well, it's like, well, you don't trust the result? No, because there's no reason to trust the result. What have you given me to trust it other than you just telling me what this is? Exactly. Yeah, our voting system is atrocious. I mean,
it's really bad.
Yeah, you should be able to look at these people, count these votes to ensure that what's taking place is an honest and fair election. Otherwise, it's like whatever change or social change that you're trying to get accomplished is going to run up against this thing of how do you know that the person who's getting elected is the person who's the public wanted?
People know that the ecological clock is ticking and disaster is coming. So we need like radical change, but we can't actually get the radical change because our votes are being suppressed, right? So, I mean, an easy fix, like if I'm elected Secretary of State, we're going to be looking directly to Ireland, right? Because they use hand-counted paper ballots. They use ranked choice voting. And in California, we've already attempted this. We put SB 1288 all the way up, passed all the way through all the assemblies and all the legislation, got to Governor Jerry Brown, the Democrats' desk, and he vetoed it.
What? But you can understand why. That directly challenges his capacity to stay in office. In fact, it directly challenges all of those Democrats to maintain their offices. If you don't have lesser evil, I mean, their political strategy goes out the window. I mean, this whole thing of you have nowhere else to go is the political strategy. That's their level of brinksmanship that they use to get elected. If you take
they tried to make their slogan, "Have you seen the other guys?" Just like last year, right? Remember that? It was horrible.
They were looking at different slogans. I remember that.
Oh man,
that's so sad. That's so sad.
So yeah, a Green Secretary of State, right? We're gonna go hand-counted paper ballots. We're gonna push for SB 1288, bring it back because I can propose legislation to the Congress. So ranked choice voting for all cities. Right now we have it in San Francisco, Berkeley, and Oakland because they're unincorporated cities, right?
Yeah.
But we need that ranked choice voting for general cities because that's what the majority of our cities are. And then the one thing that I'm going to attribute to like Jill Stein and David Cobb really are mandatory recounts, right? In both of their presidential runs, David Cobb in 2004 and Jill in 2016, they did recounts. David was able to raise enough for a recount in Ohio that showed massive discrepancies with the voter machines in Ohio. And that's where these scanned, there was a second wave of voting machines that came after 2004 that had scanners, right? So now they can actually scan your ballot and they'll have like a digital copy. Unfortunately, in many red states, they've actually passed laws to turn off the scanner.
That's amazing.
Arguing that, we're going to cost us more money having to do the whole scan thing. Let's just turn them off.
This is kind of my point. This is what I mean when I say I don't know if I don't think they want to know it. Like, I think the fudge is part of the game for them. Like, that fudge factor is there. It's like anytime something goes wrong, it always goes towards the side with the most, resources and cash and, the establishment's side for that. I think they like that fudge factor. I think that fudge factor essentially helps them. Because honestly, if you really wanted to know who won, then you take steps to try to know who wins. Turning off the scanner is not one of those ways of verifying the vote. In fact, it's the opposite of trying to verify the vote. It's amazing.
The people do not want what we have in power. They don't want it. People are leaving the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in droves.
Yeah.
People are sick and tired of all this, right? So what my goal is is to actually first you have to analyze exactly what the problem is, right? So the problem is capitalism, right? Socialism is the cure, right? So I have that analysis, right? And then I started looking for, well, what kind of organization supports that analysis and that'll actually contest that problem with everything that it has. And there's multiple third parties in existence, like Peace and Freedom and Socialist Alternative and African People's Socialist Party. And there's multiple parties that have that analysis. Once you get that analysis, now you need the structure to actually be able to launch that people-powered assault on this problematic, defunct system of capitalism. And that structure, just like turning off the scanners, that structure is virtually impossible. It's not impossible, but it's decades in the making to actually get a third party to the position to where they can even contend in an electoral college or even have ballot access in the state, right?
Yeah, they make it difficult on purpose.
They make it very, very, very difficult. And so, like in Illinois, for instance, if you want to run for office just as a candidate, right, you got to collect. So for Democrats and Republicans, the stack of signatures is like this thing. But if you're the Green Party, your stack of you got to bring in like a whole filing cabinet.
Are you serious?
Signatures. It's thousands and tens of thousands to get on the ballot in Illinois. It's absurd, right? But they did it. The Green Party.
That's amazing.
They did it, and they've done it. And
like, this is immensely problematic. I mean, this is the opposite of democracy.
Exactly.
Like Ralph Nader kind of made this point, like, if you guys hate third parties so much, then take their platform away from them. Like, right. Offer the things that these other parties are doing. Because look, in the old days, one of the ways that they used to pull the Democratic Party to the left was because those parties were threats. They were viable threats. In which case, they started to appropriate some of the things that these other parties had. It's like the third party themselves would pressure the major parties, and the major parties would appropriate certain things. Right. In this case, it's odd and weird because the Republican Party, it's so insane. And because they're so insane, Democrats pivot off of that, using the same corporate overlords, however, with just different rhetoric, even though many of the policies that these guys are taking on are very similar.
I think Prince nailed it down pretty good when he said, it's the illusion of choice, the two-party system.
Illusion of choice. I love it.
So
same wings, yeah.
If you got a capitalist party, right, like the Democratic Party, I mean, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, they've made it very clear we are capitalists, right?
Capitalists. Did you hear Nancy Pelosi's statement? The guy asked her, he said, there are a lot of people who are saying they're going to be socialists. I mean, 51% or something like that. And she says, well, just so we're clear, we're capitalists.
We're capitalists. Right.
I love the way we're capitalists.
Yeah. So what do? They capitalize, right? So when they see a social movement, so to them it's just nothing more than a trend, or oh, that's what's popular. Well, let's capitalize on that, right? And we'll co-opt that language, and we'll put on whatever rah-rah t-shirt we have to wear, and say,
everybody's lefty now.
Everybody doesn't take corporate money, right? You can support Hillary Clinton for like 10 years, 20 years, and somehow you're a progressive now because you stopped taking corporate money like 2 months ago, right? So that's what they're doing is they are doing exactly what you said. They're fully on appropriating everything about Bernie's message, right? Yeah. And
without actual doing anything about it. Like it's right. The appearance of action or the appearance of change.
No, they're like, no, see, we wrote it down. It's on a platform. It's on paper, right? Okay, so if the FBI can't hold Hillary Clinton accountable, this piece of paper is not gonna hold them accountable, right? It's a piece of paper. They'll shred it in a heartbeat.
They kept screaming platform. It was like, we have a lefty platform. We have a lefty platform. It's like, but nobody ever pays attention to the platform. Nobody ever pays attention to the platforms. It's like, it's like they're screaming about how awesome their platform is. It's like, but that platform is going to be ignored the moment. Yeah, on day one, that platform is going to be ignored.
That's counterfeit money, man. It's just, you know what I mean? It may look like a dollar, right? You know what I mean? But you can't buy nothing with that, right? So, and it's a terrifying thing, because where did Bernie get that platform for? If you read Our Revolution, Bernie attributes a lot of his political education to his older brother, Larry Sanders, who's the health minister of the Green Party UK, right? And so the Green Party got its start in 1972 in Australia, right? And their first elected official was in like 73 or 74 or whatever. But it's always been the same thing. It's been like, okay, the extraction system, right, of attaining more, it's killing the planet, right? It's unsustainable. And we actually need a grassroots movement that will completely paradigm shift the way we do things, because we just can't do it. And a good example for this is so like a lot of people were pushing for what's called open source voting, right?
Yeah.
So open source voting is an electronic voting method that does include paper ballots. You use like a grocery scanner to check a barcode when you count the vote. It's significantly more reliable than any other voting machines there are, right? But there's still electronic voting machines, and all electronic voting machines are hackable. So, granted that it's more reliable, in my opinion, knowing that hand-counted paper ballots and mandatory recounts, that combination, is a winning solution in 59 countries, right? I don't understand, why would we take it upon ourselves to enrich another corporation to build millions of these plastic boxes, and now we got millions of these plastic boxes, and what happens when a hacker finally does figure out to hack the open source voting? Well, now we got millions of garbage that is just going to end up in the dump again, right?
And they're unnecessary.
We just produce more plastic, right? Like, as a green, right? Yeah. Like, it's bad enough we have to use paper, right? But we need a huge paradigm shift, a social conscious shift, to understand that we only get one shot at this. We only got one planet. If we mess it up, we're dead, right? So, and that means changing everything from our election systems, right? Changing the way we eat our food, the way we produce our food, the way we travel, right? So once again, I'd say look at that Green New Deal, because when you look in the green transition, what do you see? You see America used to have the largest, most inexpensive public transportation in the world, the trolley systems. And then in the 50s, the corporations came in, bought up all the trolleys and junked them, right, to build the highway systems for gas, for the oil industry, right? So we need a new public transportation system that runs off renewable energy. We got to get off the fossil fuels. We got to stop the fracking. Is so suicidal. Yep. It's unbelievable, right? We got to figure out permaculture. We got to do it quick. We got to get away from the monocropping. We got to get away from the industrialized animal agriculture, the way that's being done, because that's just destroying water and groundwater all over.
Half a climate.
Yeah,
climate change is animal agriculture.
Right. So here's another reason why the Green Party, right, is the Green Party is actually, like, we got to fix this country, because this country honestly is the root of many, many problems all over the world. Once we fix this country, that's not enough to stop climate change, right? Like, we actually have to get the whole world on board if we're going to actually stop, because it's a closed system, right? What happens over here affects over here. So if it's just America that goes green and a lot of the other industrial countries continue these ridiculous practices, we're still screwed, right? So if we can get our act here in America, the Green Party is the largest electoral movement in the world. There's 91 international Green parties, and we're all united around those first four pillars that I talked to you about earlier: the democracy, social justice, ecology, and nonviolence, peace. And so if we can get our act here in America, Canada, the MP of the Green Party of Canada was just arrested at the Kinder Morgan pipeline protest, right? We have allies up north. We got 91 countries that we can go to and say, hey, look, here's what we did in America. Or more realistically, hey, what are you guys doing?
What are you doing, right?
And how can we use that, right? I mean, that's another thing that America, with paradigm shift, like humility is certainly lacking in this country.
Yeah.
We're the greatest country in the world, right?
Right there. Yeah, it's funny. No, I don't know anybody else who goes around saying that. It's like I'm the best fucking person on the planet. And it's like, it's because when I grew up with that mindset. Like I would imagine most people grew up with that mindset. The United States is the greatest country in the world. Everybody else has to learn from us, not the other way around. We're top notch. And then you go somewhere else and you're like, oh, we're not, this public transportation is not that great. That's not that great. Our education system's falling apart. Our healthcare system's
36.
Highways are falling apart. It's like you get a reality check. Yeah. So one last question. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to get across to the audience before we go?
Yeah. So I'm living in Humboldt County, California. It's a rural community on the coast. Since I've been here, basically I kind of came here. My parents moved here about 7 years ago. But one of the big reasons I came here is because when I was at Standing Rock, one of the largest camps, the largest camp kitchen in camp that was feeding everybody was called California Kitchen. And they were Hoopa, Yurok, a lot of the local indigenous tribes from right here, right? And so when I came out here, my parents are getting older, and I'm taking care and doing what I can, pitching in with the family and everything. But when I came here, a lot of the people that I met out at Standing Rock were living here, and they were working on indigenous rights here. This is actually one of the California, for those who do not know, is like if you look at it per ratio, like of genocide and horrible atrocities, what transpired in California between 1850 and 1860 was probably one of the worst genocides ever in human recorded history, maybe. It was really, 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 really awful, and it was state sanctioned. So there's a lot of history here that is attributed to that colonization and genocide. And when I got here, folks from the Hoopa and the Yurok were working on actively, removing some of these symbols, for instance. There's a lot of white supremacists that are actually getting a hold of the work that we're doing here. And it's a bit, it's scary because that's actually the dominant culture. So there's a statue in Arcata Plaza, Arcata, California, just north of where I'm at in Eureka, of President William McKinley. Right? Mm-hmm. William McKinley passed what was called the Benevolent Assimilation Proclamation, and he colonized the Chamorro, Guam, the Taino Nation of Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and he annexed Hawaii. Right. So in the Philippines, it was a massive, massive, hundreds of thousands of Filipinos.
Yeah, that was a massive war.
Right. And there was like concentration camps and the whole gamut of terrible things. Also, he passed a thing called the Curtis Act that abolished the governments, courts, and land rights of the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole tribes, opened up all their land to settlements, did the same thing in Oklahoma to the Kiowa, the Apache. There's a statue of this guy right here in Wiyot territory, where the Wiyot tribe is here. And so the Wiyot Tribal Council got together and said, you know what? We would like it if you would remove the statue of this infamous colonizer from the downtown city square, right? Like, we're tired of looking at this every day. It doesn't mean shit to you because there's like 80% majority Caucasian populace. Like, you just look at it. It's just, you don't even know what it is. It's just something you used to, throw panties on his head when you were going to college or HSU or something. You know what I mean? But for us, it's a constant reminder of the dominance and destruction of our cultures, our governments, our way of life, our water, our resources, our animals. And so we had a Green Party member on the city council, and we got him to push a proposal to remove the statue, and it passed 4-1. And but since then, there's been this ridiculous backlash of like the old logging community. And, a lot of people, when people think of Humboldt, just like when people think of California, you're like, oh, it's a lefty state, right? And when people think the same thing about Humboldt, oh, Humboldt, they're growing all the cannabis out there. You know, it's like, you know, you have this idea of what it is, but the roots are of this old logging colonialism, and there's a massive fight against it. Simultaneously, a young African American man last year was murdered. He was the president of the Brothers United Club at HSU, and he was stabbed to death, maced and stabbed to death, multiple, like 15 times stabbed. The police totally botched the whole entire thing, let the suspect leave with the weapon, didn't even question him or get any statements from anybody for like a week almost. And so now we've basically got a bunch of terrified people of color that know that there's a murder on the loose, and the Arcata PD and this like old logging community could care less, right? Yeah. So the indigenous folks of this area, all the people of color, they're trying to get their education over at HSU, are like, there's a problem here. This is not the progressive town that we thought it was. And there's one particular city council member that voted against the removal of the statue. He also made some statements blaming the black community here, literally calling them out and saying that, you know, the police chief resigned for Arcata PD, and he blamed it on the black community. It's like, no, the guy botched the case so bad that he doesn't want to face, he wants to get out now, or he has to like face the whole brunt of the music, you know? And so what's happening here is kind of an intersectional situation where the people that are actually oppressed by the dominant culture and our accomplices within the white community are actually getting together and saying, actually, you know what, this whole system of, you know, everybody scratching everybody's backs and making sure that, you know, the Josiah Lawson, say his name, Josiah Lawson was murdered last year in 2017, unsolved. His mom isn't even allowed to see the autopsy report, and it's ridiculous. So Josiah Lawson, and so what's happening is all these communities are like, you know what, the system of everybody trying to, no, let's not talk about genocide, it's too uncomfortable. Let's not remove the statue because we don't want to talk about the fact that children were sold there for $50 and they were selling their parents' scalps there like in 1850, less than 200 years ago, right? Nobody wants to talk about that stuff. But what we have to do is actually get together, right? Like one attack on one village is an attack on all villages, right? The truth of America is that this country was built on white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy, what we refer to as colonialism, right? And it was built on the graves of my ancestors and the whip-scarred backs of African Americans' ancestors, right? This is our continent. We quite literally are either from it or we built it, right? And we have a right to it. Until this day, people like Donald Trump and all of his ridiculous right-wing supporters and David Duke and churches and all these institutions that are so ingrained with the idea of manifest destiny that they're supporting, you know, Blue Lives Matter is just unbelievable.
That's
repugnant. It's repugnant.
That's utterly repugnant. Yeah.
So what's happening is this intersectional convergence of people that are oppressed by this dominant system, right? And so, like Russell Means from the American Indian movement says, is, you know, welcome to the reservation, middle-class white folks, right? Because they got rid of slavery, right? And, you know, they've taken everything from us already. So who do they have to take from now? The white middle class. So now you are finally feeling the oppression of capitalism that we've been dealing with for 500 years. It's finally at your front doorstep. You're finally having to work like 3 times as hard as anybody should be required to keep food on your table and keep the power on. And you're finally starting to feel what they've been doing to us all along, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, things like Bernie Sanders, those messages of actually, hey, let's fix this, they're coming, right? So what we got to do, is we got to reach out to, you know, it's got to be white solidarity with Black power, with Indigenous rights, LGBT rights, women's rights, immigrants' rights, and we all got to come together and start building this movement, right? And we all got to come up together, because if we leave anybody behind, then we're just building another system of inequality. We'll be right back here in no time, right? We got to build that movement, right? We got to build it until there's millions and millions and millions and millions of us. And then when we do, the reason that I'm wearing this green shirt is because we have to have an electoral avenue to codify the change, right? Because if we just build it and the Democrats say, oh, okay, well, here's another act. Here's a little token progress, right? And we'll say it's another piece of paper, just like 500 broken treaties.
Yeah.
That says a lot of good stuff. And everybody can go home and we can continue fracking the shit out of all your water resources, right? So we actually need to change the system. Regulation is not enough. Any regulation can be deregulated.
Yeah.
We need to codify massive systems change so that we don't get back in another 20, 30 years. I mean, this boom and bust cycle is just going to continue. If we regulate capitalism now, it's going to come back and bite us in the ass later. So we actually need socialism. Not any socialism will do. Democratic, socially just, ecological, and peaceful, nonviolent socialism that empowers your community on the grassroots level, puts the power into the people's hands, and takes the power back from the capitalist-run state. And that's what I'm working for.
Very cool. Couldn't say it. That's awesome. I mean, and you're right. Yeah, man, you're absolutely right. Can I ask you one last thing? And I'll keep this quick. Redskins. So, you know, the team Washington Redskins. I had my mom loves the team, and I don't know why she loves the team. I think it's just because we're from Washington D.C. and you know. And I tried to make the point to her. I was like, if they call the team Washington Niggers,
oh my God,
you would have some serious issues with it. I was, you know, if it was like the Richmond Negroes, and you know, it's like the Richmond Negroes are going against, people's heads would explode.
They would.
The Redskin thing slides like nobody's business. The only reason I'm saying this, you mentioned Apache and how they name these helicopters and missiles and everything else, and they take like it doesn't cross anybody's mind that you're comparing. You destroy the population. And then on top of destroying the population, you're using almost like the ferocity or ferocity as if they're unhuman in order to describe weapon systems and even to describe teams. Could you just a quick word on that part on the problems with the Redskins thing and why that's so offensive? Sure.
So, I mean, quite literally, they treat us like animals, right?
And by the way, I'm saying this, my grandfather's Cherokee. He's half Cherokee. Yeah. I'm saying this from the perspective of somebody who's, you know, on both sides of the family we have Native Americans. So,
man, I can't wait till we deal with this problem, because once we deal with this problem, we're going to realize how many indigenous people we actually have in this country. And we're going to be able to step into our power in a big way, right? So literally, they put us on animal reserves, right? To breed out the one-drop rules. You remember the one-drop rules?
Yeah. If you have one drop of black in you, or I guess I would say Native American, then
or Chinese, right?
Yeah.
So like a lot of those original one-drop rules applied to all of us, right? You had to be a white male landowner, right? So that changed because they pushed us to the brink of extinction. Here in California, the Yahi tribe, that's in the Gold Rush area. That's where I grew up. Was in the Gold Rush area where they found the largest gold nugget ever, right? The Yahi are extinct. They're gone. There's not one single member of their tribe alive. Not one drop of blood of Yahi blood exists. That's a human extinction, right? So that's where anthropology came from, right? They really saw that we're on the brink of being pushed to extinction. So they started studying human Native Americans. And that's why we have anthropology, strictly because of it, right? So the truth of the matter and how you get the Redskins is the erasure of our humanity, of our history, of our culture, right? The only way you can say Redskins and think of a football team and not be, you know, horrified with the racism of it is if our humanity, of our history, and our culture has been erased from your life. Right. So, and it's really fun to see while we're bringing down these statues. We also had a big win up north in Trinidad where we removed a lighthouse. You know, they pushed all the indigenous tribes off the coastline, like my tribe and the Yurok. They built a lighthouse on their burial site at Cheri Village, right? Well, the Yurok finally had enough. They went and locked down with members of Hupa and other tribes like myself. We locked down on that thing for 12 days, made them bring in a crane and pull that lighthouse off of Cheri Village, right? So the arguments that we're hearing to the statue of William McKinley, to the lighthouse over at Cheri Village are, well, you're erasing our history, right? You're erasing our history. And I'd just like to say to all white people is that you erased our history from every waterway, every name of every town, of every mountain, everywhere. You erased us from everything. So it's time that the people of this continent step forward into their power. If you got one drop of Indian blood in you, you're Indian. This is your continent, and we have every right to fight for it, to protect our water, our land, our animals, and our way of life. Right?
Goddamn right. Thank you, man. Erik, I appreciate you coming on to the show, man. Erik Rydberg, Secretary of State, running as a candidate for Secretary of State in California. I wish you all the luck in the world, man.
Thank you.
You have a good one. All right, guys. And let's see. Oh, wait. There are people here who are... Okay, Balthazar. When they blame Lenin, they're just stalling. Oh, geez. I love this. When they blame Lenin, they're just stalling for time. How can they call it Democratic Party when no one gets to vote on the hours or the hors d'oeuvres? Oh, now no one gets to vote on hors d'oeuvres. I think I'm messing it up, but I'm sorry, Balthazar. Justin B. Awesome having Erik on, Jamal. I hope he wins. Let's have a green wave in California. Getting Kenneth Mejia. How do you pronounce this? Kenneth Mejia? Mejia. Gail McLaughlin. I remember Gail McLaughlin and Erik elected in November. And Balthazar, the pro-Palestinian voices are silenced by the media and circumcisions beyond their control. If Israel had to throw rocks too, peace might come faster. Yeah, they'd be in a rock fight. They'll lose their rock fight. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. Again, Erik, thank you very much, man. You know, I wish you all the luck in the world in that election. I wish you the best. You've been a friend of the show since the show started, so thank you very much.
Well, we're just getting started, my friend.
Absolutely. All right, guys, can we call it erasing our history? Erasing our history. That's why. Balthazar, that is absolutely hilarious. Yes, we can call it erasing our history. It's hard to pronounce it. All right, guys, y'all have a good one. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And of course, you can always support the patron. Balthazar, Justin, and there was one other person. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate all of your help for the show. You guys keep the show going. Thanks, guys.